You'd think we'd actually adjourn at this point, but there is one other item before closing announcements. It's a session that we have at ARIN all the time, and it's called Open Microphone. It's where you get to provide feedback to the room, the board, the staff, as to how we're doing. So I'm going to move into open mic now. If anyone has any questions regarding things that have happened over the last day and a half, questions on matters that haven't come up, you have a question you'd like to address to the board, we'll have an open mic session both today and tomorrow. I know it's sunny today and fairly early, but we also have one tomorrow. But avail yourself of the microphones if you have any questions. I see someone approaching the mic. Excellent.
Hi, Janine Goodman with Avenue 4. And actually, this is kind of almost feedback on a policy that was implemented in last February, 2015, I should say. So one of the issues that Leslie raised in her presentation on accuracy of the registry was the issue of legacy holders coming forward, and we discussed one issue as to why we thought that might be problematic, but there's actually another issue which we're coming up against over and over with legacy holders who are our clients, and that is the language in 8.2 that deals with justification if ARIN becomes aware of the number of resources are no longer justified, that ARIN will work with the resource holders to return or transfer resources. Now I know that 2014-9, which was intended to reconcile conflict with the RSA, Section 6, regarding the fact that ARIN could not deregister numbers, and so went in, passed policy that took out the word reclaim from 8.2, and there's language that is certainly intended to make clear that ARIN is not going to go in and yank the numbers away. But what we're finding is that legacy holders, that's not comfort enough. It's almost the same issue that you raised yesterday with the potential sellers who want to sell the /16, hold on to a 24. You give them some reason to think this is not a big issue and it's just not enough. And we're finding legacy holders come to us and they say, but ARIN can work with us on returning the numbers, and it's actually it's almost as much of an issue when they're using the numbers because they might not be using an entire block. And we've had legacy holders that will not do an 8.2 because they are concerned that ARIN will come back and take the numbers away and they don't feel like they can afford it. And we've gone through the history and showed how, there's a policy, they took out the word reclaim, and it doesn't make a difference. So I just want to kind of bring that to the attention. Now, obviously, 2015-9 taking away needs assessment, that for 8.2, that would address that. I just wanted to make you aware that to the extent,
right, it's still an existing problem. So let's talk about this. People have to understand the process by which we would do reclamation or revocation of resources. If you found yourself in that circumstance, it's a pretty big situation at ARIN. We actually have a long process you can find online that we go through. For example, for non-payment, it can be 150 days with us contacting you. Revocation for other reasons, where literally we're doing it because of a violation of policy, is few and far between. And in particular, revocation contrary to the RSA, well, to my knowledge, doesn't happen because the RSA is an agreement that lays out your rights, and I wouldn't be reclaiming resources contrary to that. So I do understand that the number resource policy manual can give someone pause. The absolute best protection they have is a signed LRSA, which gives them absolute concrete statement that says, notwithstanding anything of the following, we will not reclaim number resources for lack of utilization, period. Okay? And so I know some people look at that and go, oh, I don't want an LRSA because it disclaims property rights. It does, but it also gives very specific statement that's very clear rights that we will not be involved in reclamation for lack of utilization. And so it might be an education issue here because the people who are shying away from the LRSA because they're not sure what they're giving up are also shying away from the rights it provides.
Well, I don't want to. There was a discussion yesterday about the LRSA, so I don't want to go back into that because that was hashed out somewhat. But I think for the same reason, you're right. They are reluctant for the LRSA, but But this is even before you get to the LRSA point. And,
Right.
and you could sit there and say, okay, but you go through, because as soon as you apply for that transfer, their issue isn't even getting to signing the LRSA. It's, I don't even want to let ARIN know that I'm out there and raise the issue and even apply for a transfer and get to that point.
It's a difficult problem. I don't have a good answer for that one. Yes, Vin. I'm sorry, Dan? Or Vin?
John.
Vin.
So I saw a movie recently. It was something about a bridge, and there's this Russian spy on one end, and there's some other people on there. Maybe you need a procedure where the /16 comes in this direction, and the /24 comes over here, and they do a swap in the middle.
Well,
Dan?
this doesn't even deal with that issue. This is literally about, a legacy holder just to update their records and reflect. They've gone through various mergers over
Right.
years. It can be complicated. They want to straighten out their records, and they won't do that, which really goes very much to the issue of, that really does, I think, go to the issue of registry accuracy that Leslie was getting at in her presentation.
Well, it may not be the same issue as the 16 and the 24 and the bridge, but it is a very similar situation about trust. Your legacy holder probably needs to talk to the last 5 who have gone through the process successfully. Really would be worthwhile.
John,
Yeah, well.
Yes, Dan?
it might be worth noting the editorial process that's currently underway regarding the A2 update.
You go ahead.
Regarding- The advisory council was looking at this previously, and there was actually a draft proposal created to deal with this return language, but we actually felt that it was more editorial in nature, so there is a separate process for ARIN to proceed or do a review of an editorial change, and that process was requested
That is
last month.
underway. For that
Yes.
for that particular section, we're going to try to improve the language.
Okay, well, I
Without
think.
changing the current practice or intent, but to improve the language to make it clearer.
May I comment on
Okay,
that?
well, maybe we'll take a look at that, and, it is, I just want to let you know the practical impact of the language on updating the registry.
Okay, thank you. Scott, do you want to respond to that
Yes.
point? Go ahead.
To expand on what Dan just said, I have the email in front of me that says the review period for this change is open until the 23rd of April, which is 4 more days. The language that we are proposing to replace with says specifically that ARIN will work with the resource holders to transfer the extra number of resources to other organizations or accept a voluntary return of the extra number of resources to ARIN. So hopefully that's clearer, but I would appreciate anyone with interest in this to go ahead and read through that and make a comment in response to the announced editorial process.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on this? Otherwise, we got someone else at the mic. Okay, next issue, rear microphone. Steve.
Stephen Middleton, Verizon Communications. I have concerns about the increase of ARIN fees recently announced. My primary concern, though, that I'd like to voice is the timing. Budget increases take time. It takes a great deal of time in large corporations, much like Verizon Communications. We would like to see more time in preparing budget increases of 4 times or greater what we have been paying in the past.
Right. No. If I can speak, it is true. The largest, in our most recent fee change, which will roll out in July, the largest IPv4 resource holders received a significant increase because what was prior a cap on the number of categories now goes all the way up. And that categories at the top level could represent 2 or 4 times increase in fees. So it is definitely a significant change. We have been working on the fee change for several years, but working on it isn't the same as requesting budget approval. And so it is true that there were, while the fees went down for thousands of ARIN members, it went up for a handful, about 97 large organizations. I don't know if the board wants to speak to this about the timing of that increase or anything.
I have a question. I don't know whether you wanted to say what the absolute dollar increase is in the case of Verizon, but that might be an interesting factoid to inform the discussion.
Council. Right. For the largest category, largest resource holders could have seen increases of, based on the total IPv4 holdings per organization. Some of these organizations have multiple entities, but for an organization, it could have seen an increase from 16 to 128,000 or $100,000 an organization.
I believe the comparison between the two highest values is $32,000 could increase to as much as $256,000.
Actually, you're right on the highest one. On the highest category, you're correct. I forgot, the community removed even the higher category. So I guess the question would be, it was the views after going through a 2-year consultative process that the fees should be proportional to the benefit of the resources, and therefore as the resources go up, geometrically the fees go up. My question would be, it's not that principle you're concerned as much as just the fact that when it occurred, you need more time to be able to respond to it.
Sorry, microphone was off.
Oh, sorry.
Correct.
Okay.
Within the budget cycle. Not saying that we wouldn't be concerned about the increase of fees.
Understood.
Ourselves,
I think one has
But the primary
to.
concern is to try to be prepared for them.
Right. Understood. I think one has to object to an increase in fees, but understood the timing issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Steve. All right, on this matter of the fees, yes, Jason?
Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. I've looked at the fee structure quite a bit, so I wanted to share what I found with those of you in the room who maybe haven't looked at it. For the end user, if they choose the, what is that called? The end user billing structure, it hasn't changed. For ISPs or those that choose to have the service category fees, if you fall into the same sized bucket as you did before, it doesn't change. What has changed is they've created some new buckets. So previously there was a double extra small, which cost $500 annually, and that was a /22 or smaller. And they've created a triple extra small, which is a 24 or smaller, and the fee has been reduced to $250. So if you happen to have a 24 or less, you used to be a 2x small, and now you're a 3x small and you pay less. Same thing on the higher side. The old highest category was a double extra large, which was larger than a /12, and that was $32,000 a year. Now they've added a 3 extra large, which is larger than a 10 at $64,000, a 4 extra large, which is larger than an 8, which is between an 8, I'm sorry. The 3X is larger than a 10 and smaller than an 8, which is $64,000. Larger than an 8 and smaller than a 6 is a quadruple extra large at $128. And then there's a pentuple extra large, which is larger than a /6 at $256,000.
Right.
So if you are a very large player in the double extra large bucket, your fees went up accordingly to what bucket you now fall into. And if you have a /24 or less, your fees will go down because now you fall into the smaller bucket.
Right, correct. Okay, any other comments on the fee topic or any other topic? I'm going to be closing the mic shortly. Yes, thank you.
This is just a quick one. I wanted to address something that Selena mentioned in her IANA update, and that was about the returns. I was the person at APNIC that asked how much would the RIRs need to contribute back into that bucket in order to get rid of this trickle. The last delegation that the IANA will give out is a /23, and we're going to wait 3 years for that or something. I thought it was a good idea for us to put it back in, and APNIC was willing, or is willing to put it in, and I think, I don't want to speak for Right, but I'm going to. They indicated that they would be willing to contribute. I think it's maybe still under discussion, but I think it's unlikely to go ahead.
If I can paraphrase, the thought is that currently the remainder IPv4 allocation policy has an algorithm that divides things up into even units. If it divides up in even units, then the remaining, all the returned IPv4 addresses, that's the IANA, could actually be passed out into even-sized slices to the 5 RIRs, and they'd be done. And right now, as it is, that's not the case. When they do the division, there's a remainder, which means 6 months later they have to do the division again, and there's a remainder. And we continue to get small dribbles and drabs from the IANA for several years. Is that correct?
That's what I'm talking
Okay.
about. Thank you.
So just, and then that has been discussed at the NROEC, though we haven't talked about it yet in the communities, to my knowledge. That is the remaining IPv4 unicast address space. Right now, when the IETF does a specialized or technical assignment, it comes from that same pool. So there's two consequences of rounding that pool to an even 5 buckets. The first one is it may not stay at an even 5 because someone writes a wonderful internet RFC and they allocate some IP unicast space for some IETF protocol, and now it's not even again. But the second issue is if it is even, there no longer is IPv4 address space at the IANA to satisfy the IETF. That we have been talking about because the IETF invented that v4 address space, and it's nice of us to put it to use, but it's interesting when we're so efficient that we take the last block from the IANA, leaving none for any protocol work. And so if we go about that approach, there needs to be a little bit of coordination to make sure the IETF can still do unicast IPv4 assignments for specialized and technical purposes for protocols that need that. And we haven't done that coordination yet, so getting in there with 5 even straws to draw it down to 0 seems impolite. Does that make sense?
Thank you. That's what I was going to say, actually. You said that very eloquently, much better than I could have. Thank you, John.
Thank you for raising it, though. Okay, microphones remain open on that topic or a new topic?
New topic.
New topic. On that topic or a new topic?
That topic.
Continue, Owen.
Owen DeLong, ARIN AC Akamai. I actually don't think it's all that impolite to round out the pool and suck it dry. I think it's pretty close to the point that the IETF is not working on v4 anymore anyway, and I think that should be encouraged.
Okay, interesting approach. I guess if they labeled it historic, then you'd know they weren't working on it anymore. Okay, back microphone. Go ahead, Jason.
Jason Schiller, Google ASOAC. I hope Mike Joseph is listening. I hope Mike Joseph is listening. I lament the lack of a services document. Do we have an update on when we'll see one?
So to have a services document, I wanted to work with a services working group to get that done. We actually, the board this year, chartered a services working group. We appointed the chairs. We called volunteers. We called for more volunteers. We selected the volunteers. And if we get out of this meeting and go to our board meeting, we will we'll impanel the volunteers. And then we'll have a services working group. And I will work with them on a services document that describes ARIN's registry services. Presently, you're the one between us and that. Just want to focus that. Next question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. No, it's a good reminder, and we have been a little slower than we could have been, and we're going to pick that up. The microphones do remain open. Last call. We will have an open mic session tomorrow. Jason? Yes, Jason.
So I've been talking to folks in the community, and I get the impression that there's some frustration about the questions that are called at the end of the policy discussion. And it seems like we feel like maybe more useful questions could be asked, or perhaps multiple questions could be asked. And I think it doesn't consume that much time, so I hope the AC would consider asking more questions.
So that is the questions that are asked are set by the advisory council chair. Okay? The AC members are all around. They have badges that say AC members. They talk to the chair about that. You should talk to them, and they'll talk to him. And what will happen is if enough AC members think it needs to change, it'll change, or the new chair will change it. So it works out either way. But you have to talk to the AC members. There is a couple of parliamentary important little nits here, which is that you can't ask a question that people haven't had time to discuss. So if you were talking about should the boundary be /16 or should it be /20, and someone says, I know, let's do a poll. It should be 22 and reduce 1 every year. If you didn't have time to discuss the merits of something, you can't poll on that choice. Otherwise, you violated all the parliamentary rules that allow informed discussion. It's also true that the AC used to do what I call free-form questions. This is very exciting. Having been in an AC meeting where they look at the well, it's this, but if I change this word, what about this, or with this option? And was this vote against it only if this one wasn't going to pass, or was it against it if that one was going to pass? It gets very complicated when you have multiple choices of polls. But if you have advice, certainly the policy shepherds of a particular policy have a lot of sway in it. Ultimately, the chair makes the call. Dan, do you want to comment on any of this?
The thinking going into the meeting was that the recommended draft would get the question whether or not to move forward, and all the other drafts would simply be the binary question to continue work. I understand what you're saying about wanting to ask the different flavors of each, but in the past, as John had mentioned, we have slid down that slope of the moment one extra question is asked, then 3 people get up and want different flavors of the question to be asked, and it makes the conversation difficult. The expectation was the advisory council take the feedback that was, provided at the microphone to interpret whether all the subtleties of the suggestions being made, rather than to use a poll of the room for that purpose on a draft that is not actually in a recommended state. I don't know if that helps, and we can always look at other options, but I'm just explaining why we did what we did today.
That answer your question?
Sadly, yes.
Yes. Same topic, Owen?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Owen DeLong, ARIN AC. I find the question, should the AC continue working on this or not, to be about the most useless question we could possibly ask. Because in my experience, by and large, unless it's been hashed to death and the community is simply tired of hearing us talk about that policy anymore, they will say yes to the AC should continue to work on just about anything.
Right.
And if they are tired of hearing about it, then they will say no, the AC shouldn't continue to work on it, regardless of their level of support for it. So I would prefer that we ask about support for the policy or support for the general intent of the policy proposal or something like that, rather than simply asking, do you want the AC to continue spending time on this? Thank you.
Okay, good comment.
Just
Go ahead, Dan.
Just to follow up on that. While they're all valid points, this is all something that can be and should be hashed out on the AC list, as a body prior to the meeting, rather than trying to sort it out now, which is why we just kind of moved forward as we did.
And people might remember, we used to ask the inverted question. It didn't change the answer. It used to be the bar was, do you want to abandon work on this proposal? And people said, oh, no, it's lousy, but let the AC keep working on it. There's a very low threshold for expending AC cycles. If you run for the AC, keep this in mind, important note, there's a very low threshold for expending AC cycles. The goal, what's more useful, is people saying, I have an idea. It's not that we need to poll the room. Go to the PPML and say, here's the phrasing that I think would solve the problem. Because at the end of the day, things that are coming here as draft policies are not going to the board. They're going to come back to you. So what they're really looking for is, how do we get as many people comfortable with a version that it has community support? So that's why the question at the mic of, is there any changes that would make you support it, is an important question. And if you want to see something polled because you'd support something under those circumstances, get on PPML and say that. That will actually probably have more influence than any poll would have had. Okay, on this topic, back microphone or new topic, Jason?
Same topic.
Go ahead.
Quick question, the AC list that you referenced, that's the closed AC list, is that correct?
I was referring to the internal AC list.
Yeah.
Which is closed, right?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, front microphone?
Chris Woodfield, Twitter. I just wanted to comment to what Owen said about the fact that it is rare that we vote to no longer pursue a proposal. I think what happened here is that we had 2 proposals that were, from my reading, were mutually incompatible, and the decision was, which one do we continue working on?
Right. Each policy proposal in general is presented and considered on its own as if nothing else changes. So you have to decide, do you like A just as A, or do you like B just as B? The question of if both got overwhelming support, what do? The AC is capable of handling. The AC has the right to fragment and break and merge proposals if that's what it thinks it takes to get the job done. So look at each one, independent discussion, as an independent discussion. Got it? Okay. Oh, yes, go ahead, Kevin.
I think it's also important to realize that the most important aspect is not the vote. The vote is just a sanity check in some respects of the discussion in the room.
Right.
And it's critical that the discussion expand as much as possible with the community. As far as the question in regards to the questions that are asked, I think that the community has made suggestions. I believe the AC has made suggestions. I believe the moderators have made suggestions as to changes over time over the last 3 years. It has changed 4 or 5 times since that I can remember. There's no reason we can't change it. If you have a suggestion, there are lots of ways to do it. At the end of the day, we still need to be consistent with the questions to not confuse the room, which was one of the problems we had in the past. That was a huge problem we had in the past, where we would change up the questions each time. But that being said, we can absolutely work on clarifying some of the questions.
Okay. Any other, on this topic or any other topic? Microphones are open for open mic. I am closing the queues shortly. I am closing the queues in 5, 4, 3.14159565358. 3, 2, 1. Microphones are closed. That ends our open mic session. Thank you. I now